Hello, and welcome to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and once again, we are at it with Repeats Redux. We are looking at repeat endings again, and specifically, we're looking at the document options that are available for these endings, and that's going to allow us to set up different defaults for how these repeat endings look. So let me just zoom in here a little bit. And before I get into it, I just want to point out a couple things about what I did here. So the first and second ending here, I just set up as normal, so these are by default. With the third and fourth endings, you can see I've made some height adjustments to the bracket here, so they look a little bit different. So these are manually adjusted, and they're even allowing individual edits for the third ending, which is why I did this crazy thing on the horn part here, where the third ending is lower. This is just for illustration purposes, not that you would ever probably want to do something like this, but just in case you have these manual adjustments, just to point out how some of these options are going to affect that. So let's go into the document options, and before I even get into the repeat section of this, I just want to look at the fonts for a second, because there is a setting in the fonts that will apply to this number right here in the endings, and it's in the text section, and it's right here. It's the second one. It's called ending repeat. And you notice that in this fonts window, a lot of these things have asterisks, which means that it won't change anything. If it has an asterisk, it won't change anything retrospectively, but the ending repeat does not. So when you change this font, it will actually set these text repeat numbers, or these ending repeat numbers, all at once. So we can do anything we want, choose a different font. We can just change the size if we want. I'll make that 14, and you'll see that it gets a little bit bigger there. So you can kind of set that up however you need to. Let's go back to how it was. So yeah, that's really just the font option for the number there. So let's go ahead and go into the repeats pane of the document options here, and I'm going to get into the rest of this stuff. This has more to do with the bar lines themselves and everything. I'll talk about that in a later video, but I'm concerned with the bottom section here. We have this one option for adding the period after the number, and that's literally doing just that. If you unselect it, it might be hard to see on this score at this zoom level, but the period goes away from the numbers, and it will apply to all the numbers at once. Now, if you happen to have a list of numbers, like you have a first, second, and third ending, 1, 2, 3, Finale will list it 1, 2, 3, period. If you uncheck this, Finale will list it 1, 2, 3 with nothing after that. So it's really adding the period after the last number is really what's going on there. All right, so let's look at the repeat endings. And when you click this button, you get sort of this little sub window of options for the repeat endings themselves. And this will, help us sort of set the defaults for how these endings look. And you can see a bunch of options here, starting with the height of the bracket. And as I mentioned, I set some of these up sort of individually, so that there's some differences between the default. I made some manual adjustments. Any change that you make here will move all of these things in parallel, so it'll sort of add to the manual adjustments, right? It's sort of like, if you consider it like baselines and expressions. If you make a manual adjustment and then change the baseline, it will also increase plus the manual adjustment, sort of how that works. So anyway, if we change the height of the bracket here, just change that to 0.45 or something, you'll see that the brackets will get higher all across the board, all in parallel. So that's sort of what's going on there. Go back here, and we do have this handy option here to reset, which is nice. We can do that, and that will reset sort of to the default values that Finale has decided look quote unquote good for repeat endings. And then actually, let's go over here to the right. We're looking at the ending repeat text, and there's a horizontal and vertical offset value for the text itself, or the number here. If you realize what the 0 points are here if you set this to 0 and 0, Finale is going to base these offsets from the bottom left corner of the ending here. So it's going to sort of pin it to the end of the hook. So if I click OK, you'll see that it did just that, sort of pin to that hook value there, which is important because when we start changing the lengths of the hook, it will actually move the numbers parallel to that, because again, it's sort of pinning off that point and then adding the offsets. So just kind of important to realize that. And you're going to see that in in practice right now, because I'm going to start talking about the lengths of the front hook and the lengths of the back hook. Now, interestingly, the length value here is positive. A lot of times in Finale, positive numbers will go upwards, vertically speaking, and negative numbers will go downwards. But with the length of the hooks, the positive numbers are going downwards. I guess it's, because the hook would always go downwards, so they made it a positive number. I guess that makes sense. Now, you could make this a negative number, and the hook would actually reverse the other way. But actually, let's see what happens when we make this a little bit smaller. We'll make this 0.15 on the front hook. And you'll notice a couple of things. First of all, the numbers themselves moved up with the hook, right? It's because I just mentioned that number is pinned off this bottom left corner. So when that bottom left corner moves up, the numbers move up. So that's what's going on. Also, you'll notice that not only did the front hook get shortened, this hook got shortened. The right side of the hook got shortened. Now, why would that be? It seems like that right hook would be the back hook. Not quite. So the way that Finale considers these hooks, the front hook for an ending, right, which is the second ending, for example, but also the half of the first ending that has the left hook and then the horizontal line going off to the right, the front hook is the left hook here. But the front hook is also the right hook for the back ending. As we know in the previous videos, the back endings has that hook going up from the bar line and then off to the left. It's weird to think of it this way, but the front hook is actually two things on the left and the right for the different types of endings, the endings and the back ending. The back hook, the only thing that the back hook changes, if you remember from the lesson about adjusting these brackets, you'll remember that there's a handle here all the way on the right, which will allow you to extend that hook. That hook is the back hook. That's the only thing that's affected by that back hook value. So if we go back to those document options, repeat endings, and change the back hook value, again, all we're changing is that right hook on the ending portion of it, and you'll see it do just that. Now it actually changes it here too, but obviously it's sort of overlapping with the front hook of the back ending, if that makes sense. So you wouldn't actually notice it in a first ending; you'd only notice it in the second ending here. So that's what's going on with the lengths of the hooks. And as I mentioned, you can put a negative number here if you want, and you'll see that hook get flipped up to the other direction. All right, let's go back. And what is next in this little window? Hooks, line thickness. Now this is obviously just that. It's the thickness of the lines, and it applies to all lines at once. And currently it's set to 0.006, but we can change this to 0.012. And I'm not sure if you'll notice it at this zoom level. Yeah, a little bit. The lines will get just a little bit thicker. All right, so you can adjust that as you need to. Now let's reset that. And then below that, we have the insets for start of bracket and the insets for end of bracket. Now, with both of these values, it is applying to the left side and the right side for both the ending and the back ending. So unlike the front hook and back hook, this is a little bit less confusing. The start of the bracket is always the left side of the bracket. The end of the bracket is always the right side of the bracket. What is slightly confusing about this is that it's the inset value goes different ways. And it's very semantic. The inset for the start, you're insetting it from the bar line. So in the start of the bracket, it would go to the right, so a positive number. So if we set this to 0.05, you'll see it just get a little bit off to the right here. And it will apply to all of the brackets. Again, there's a back ending here that normally would go all the way to the bar line, but again, the bracket start inset is sending that one to the right as well, if that makes sense. And just reset that. And the end of the bracket is the opposite, so the end of the bracket will always be the right side. And again, a positive number will inset it further. So in the end of the bracket situation, it will actually go to the left. So if we set this to 0.05, and I set the start back to 0, you'll see that this side of it gets inset a little bit. Of course, we can make these negative numbers. So if we actually go back here and set the inset for starter bracket to negative 0.05, you'll actually see that the start of the bracket go off to the left a little bit, right? And the opposite would happen with the end bracket, a negative number here would send it to the right. I'll actually set that one back to 0. All right, so that's sort of how those insets work. Very semantic. And then finally, the last option here at the bottom is where the ending bracket is aligned relative to the repeat bar line. And by default, it's set to the thin inner bar line. And you can see that that's sort of how that's set up, which is fine. But I've also seen it set up to the thick outer bar line in some cases. And when you do it this way, what will appear is that the ending bracket will sort of line up with the beginning of the next ending, which I have seen on occasion in some editions. So that may be an option if you want to set it up like that. And of course, it doesn't matter if you set the thin or thick outer bar line position here. The offsets for the end of the bracket will then increase or decrease from that position, right? So if I set an inset for the end of the bracket, it will actually move from this position. Again, it's sort of changing where the 0 point is. All right, so I think that's it. There's some things you can do with these settings, repeat endings. For me, the major one is I don't like how the number is so far off to the right here. So, I would probably change this vertical to, 0.08 or something. I think it just looks a little bit better, kind of tucked a little bit closer into that corner. But, you can change that as you want. And, of course, all the other settings are available for you as well. All right, so I think that's it for the repeat endings options. Hope that all makes sense. And come back. The next video, I'm going to attempt to look at that problem of the first ending spanning more than 2 bars, where you get that annoying little gap. And I'll show you a few tricks about how to fix that. All right, so thanks for watching. I hope this has helped, and I will see you soon on the next video.